Joanna Roumeliotis is with me this morning. She's been investigating the federal government's vaccination plan. Joanna, good to see you this morning, and thank you. I know you've been looking at the long game here. What is Canada looking at as far as down the road when it comes to vaccination?
Well, it's a two-pronged approach, Heather. One is to procure as much vaccine as it says it needs, and it's earmarked about more than $1 billion to do that. But while it's done that, it's also pouring hundreds of millions of dollars of money, federal funding, into vaccine development here. So it's to develop therapeutics, it's to develop vaccines, but critically, it's to develop manufacturing. And I don't know if you have the visuals going on now, but that would be the facility near Quebec City. Medicago is a biopharmaceutical company that is based there. And that is the most tangible evidence of that strategy. That is where the hope is that by 2023, the vaccine candidate that Medicago is currently developing will be produced here in Canada. And that means Canadians will always be first in line to get it when it is produced here.
We do indeed have those visuals up, so we got a sense of it. That's a massive facility that they're talking about there. Is that the only Canadian candidate, Joanna, or where do we stand with other Canadian vaccine candidates, perhaps plural?
Well, just to really quickly touch base back to Medicago, they're the front runners. They're in phase 2 clinical trials. That means they are moving to human trials and scaling up quickly. And the hope is that by the end of this year, they will have a local vaccine on the market. It won't be produced in Canada at this point because that facility isn't ready yet, but it will be within the next couple of years. And that ultimately, Medicago says, will be the game changer. Here's a listen.
I think it's a part of the role of the Canadian public health to be able to develop strategies to protect Canadians. So to secure the production of vaccine within our own borders, I think is important. So we've been working on this technology to address emerging threats for many, many years. So we are ready to go.
They're ready to go, but there's also another contender in the works, and that's Vito Intervac. That's the public lab at the University of Saskatchewan. They're also investing through the help of the federal government and some provincial funding as well to upgrade their facility to develop human-grade vaccine. And that, again, is they're just started phase 1 trials just before the holidays. And while both of them, I think it's interesting to keep in mind, both of them had a vaccine candidate early last spring, just a few weeks after the pandemic was declared. And what they've been moving towards is what other companies have been further along at, and that is the manufacturing piece. And that really is what it comes down to.
As you say, other companies further along in manufacturing, Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, the two that are approved for use in Canada so far, and they're going into Canadian arms. And as you were just, by introducing you, listening to the minister saying that they believe they have enough doses to get every Canadian who wants vaccinated by the end of September, Joanna, with those two vaccine candidates and others online and approved, or coming in once approved. But do we still, as a result then, need to have homegrown Canadian vaccines?
That's an excellent question, and that's what we set out to ask when we started doing this story. And ultimately, everybody that we spoke to talks about the long game. There's one thing, when it comes to the corona vaccine, to the COVID-19 vaccine, Canada moved quickly and it hopes it has enough vaccine right now. But this could become endemic. That means, like the flu, we might need a shot every year. Strains, as we've been seeing, have been mutating. They need to develop and act quickly to upgrade a vaccine to meet that strain. And that is important. To have that self-reliance here in Canada is key because there could be production disruptions as well. Borders can close. It's happened in the past. So ultimately, it comes down to being ready to respond to any emerging threat. And let's take a listen to Vito Intervac on what they have to say about that.
It is important for Canadians to have long-term access to vaccines that are made here, made for Canadians. We might find ourselves in the future again in a position where we're lacking behind, and maybe then we're more unlucky and not getting access to these vaccines. So I think in the long term, it's very important for Canada to have sufficient vaccine development and manufacturing capacity in the country so that we don't rely and depend on other countries in the future.
And that's really ultimately, Heather, what it comes down to, a self-reliance. And Dr. Gertz pointed out to us as well that there's a new emerging virus coming on average every couple of years. And while it may not become a global pandemic, it can cause serious outbreaks and deadly disease. So that reliance, he says, is critical for our future.
Joanna, I really appreciate it. And again, this is just a taste of what you're going to be exploring in even more detail tonight on The National, a full report on the long game. Thank you, Joanna Roumeliotis.
Thank you.
Anytime you want any information, it's not just on the Canadian vaccines in development, but more broadly on those dozens upon dozens of vaccine candidates globally, you can check out our coronavirus tracker on CBCNews.ca.